Hello friends, welcome to my new video and also welcome to the new studio. If you noticed, I have a slightly different desktop and it's only one of the many changes that I've done to my studio in my latest renovation, and I'm gonna have a video coming out with all of the details very soon, so stay tuned for that. But for now, I want to go over a couple interesting art supplies I recently picked up for my gouache and oil painting. And also today I want to try setting up my gouache palette in a very interesting and unconventional way, but I've seen a lot of artists doing it, so I want to try that too. It's gonna involve Winsor Newton blending medium to keep my gouaches from drying up in the palette, so we will see how that goes. Okay, let's start. So this first thing I want to talk about is this natural mixed media paper pad with 250 GSM and 20 sheets. The thing that I liked about this one the most is that the paper just simply has this natural tint without any of those little hairs and pieces of dust rolled into the paper. If you ever tried Strathmore tinted paper, you will know what I'm talking about. So I was excited to try this one, and I'm going to do some gouache studies on this. Another thing I picked up for gouache studies is the Fabriano paper. This one is a watercolor paper and it has a little bit of a thicker. This is 140 pound, 300 GSM, a little bit of a thicker paper. This one was on sale at the local art store and I decided to give this a try, and I also like the square format of this one. I think this is going to be interesting to experiment with some new compositions in my gouaches. And here are a couple things that I've picked up for my oil paintings. So I want to do a little bit more of sketching outside, and another beautiful piece that I got is actually a pochade box that I'm going to show next. Just very big and bulky, so I need to clean out the table so I can get that one out. And for sketching outside, I picked up Canva artboards. I use these a lot for landscape sketches and studies that I do before I start large paintings, and I just thought that these would be very economical and convenient to take them outside with me. As you can see, they have a little bit of the canvas texture, but not too much, and they are glued on one side, yes, so they are open on the other side, so it's easy to peel them off or just keep them in a pad like this. And for painting at home, I finally picked up a glass palette that I really wanted to try. I've used a disposable palette before, but I felt like I was wasting a lot of paper and I was wasting a lot of paint. When I squeeze out the paint for mixing on my palette, I would have to throw it away with the paper. It was getting hard to peel it off and put it on the next sheet of paper. So I thought that having a glass palette, and this one actually fits inside of my Stay Wet artist palette that I use, this one. So if you can see, here is what I had all of my peel off sheets for my palette, and now I'm excited to try this one. I decided to go with the gray tint, not the clear one, just because I'm so used to this. And I also picked up this white blade knife to scrape off the paint off the palette. I've just seen other artists do it with the dried up paint. Hopefully I'll remember to clean it up while it's still wet and easy to clean up, but we always know how that goes. Now moving on to the main event of today's video is setting up my gouache palette. So I picked up a couple new gouache colors that I kind of wanted to match to my oil painting palette. So some of the colors that I picked up were Spectrum Red, Alizarin Crimson, Spectrum Yellow, Lamp Black, Marigold Yellow, which is basically orange, Phthalo Blue, Red Ochre, Ultramarine Blue Light, and Permanent Rose, which is also magenta color. Some of the other colors that I will be adding to the palette are also Sap Green, Lemon Yellow, Titanium White, Raw Sienna, Raw Umber, and Lilac. So these are all the colors I'm gonna try to fit into my palette. The white one I'm actually going to dilute with the blending medium and put inside of this squeeze bottle. I'm afraid that I'm going to contaminate my white if I put it into the palette a little too much. It will be harder to have the white as a clean color in there. So I think it will be easier to just squeeze out on the palette as much of the white as I need for that painting and just keep the rest of it clean, because this is one color that you usually reach out the most for when you're painting with gouache. So what's interesting about this technique is that I've seen artists using the Winsor Newton blending medium. Let's see if the camera can focus on this, which is intended for watercolors, but I've seen artists use this with gouache, and because this medium slows drying, it also helps you to slow drying of your gouache paints so you can keep them wet for longer. And I also picked up a cute little bottle like this one, because the Winsor Newton bottle doesn't come with a dropper or anything. It just has this large opening at the top, which is pretty inconvenient because you will want to be precise with how much of the medium you use. So I just picked up this one from Michael's. It probably came with 5 or 6 more bottles in the pack, I don't remember. And the palette that I chose for this is also from Michael's by Artist Loft. And what I liked about it is that it has these wells in there that are quite deep enough to fill enough paint. I don't want to waste too much paint, so I would rather refill it with the fresh paint if I need to. And it also has removable palettes that makes it a little bit easier to clean up. And it has the gray in a bag for helping you mix colors, and I'm used to using gray palettes for mixing. So let's try this out and let's see how it goes. Okay, so before we begin, I wanted to arrange my paint tubes in the order that I want them to put down on the palette. I've got enough toothpicks to use a fresh one for each of the mixes to make sure I get an even mix of the blending medium and the paint, just so I don't have any clusters of the dry paint eventually when it starts to dry up. I have some paper towel to clean up any mess that I make. And from what I've heard, some artists use proportions of up to 1:1 with the paint and the blending medium. I'm going to start with a little bit less medium than that, so I'm gonna try to do a 1:2, so 1 part blending medium, 2 parts paint. I have different size wells in here in the palette, so I would kind of have to eyeball how much paint and medium I add to it, but that's what I'm just gonna try to do. And I know that since titanium white is far more opaque, you can actually safely use 1:1 proportion here, so you can use 1 part blending medium and 1 part paint, because that's not gonna affect it too much. And I know that the blending medium, when it dries up, it just evaporates with the water after you're done painting, so it doesn't really affect the consistency of the paint that much. but since I'm doing it just first time, I don't want to end up wasting my paint and have to scrape it up and apply it again, so I'm just gonna play it safe and not use too much, not too little. So, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see how often I'm gonna be using it and how much this is gonna be drying up. I would probably have to do a review after this is done and after I've used it for a while, but for now, let's begin. Let's see how it goes and we'll go from there. Is now complete. It was a little messier than I anticipated, but I'm happy that it's done, that I can try it out. And for the sake of the experiment, I'm actually gonna try it out on this new paper pad. It was a tinted paper that I got. It would also help me see a little bit more of the consistency of this diluted paint and just overall how it behaves. Another thing that I'm happy about now is that I think this would help me with the paint consistency overall, so it's not going to be as hard and as pasty when you squeeze it out of the tube. It will already have a little bit more of a creamy consistency and be more ready to paint. So let's zoom in a little bit closer so you can see this better. And let's start with the lemon yellow. So as you can see, all the colors are still very opaque, except for some that just naturally appear a little bit more transparent, like the sap green has a little bit more transparency. I don't know if it's because of this a little cheaper brand or just how the pigment behaves, but even the one that I mixed with the blending medium 1:1 was still very nicely opaque and very creamy and much easier to work with now. So I'm happy to see how they're gonna look when they dry up. But even now you can see when they're drying up, you get back that nice matte finish, so they're not gonna be glossy when they dry up, even though they look glossy while they're wet. But the ones that are dry, they're already matte and have that beautiful, nice, flat gouache look.